Hi again then guys, and welcome back to another look into the past of the Forza franchise, to Forza 2, for another vehicle which I would say definitely deserves at least to be considered bringing back. This is a car from a brand which has been less and less represented in the world of Forza over the years, and now also in the Gran Turismo franchise as well. We are seeing less and less of these cars, and the brand is a personal favourite of mine, TVR. Probably my favourite British marque. They make crazy little sports cars and sometimes crazy big sports cars as well, like the Speed 12. And this car, were it produced in a mass production kind of sense, as the normal Tuscan was, could well have bridged the gap between the flagship sports car from TVR, which was the Tuscan, and potentially their flagship supercar, which would have been the Speed 12, were it produced. This car nestles quite nicely between the two, and in some ways it has some similarities also to the Sagaris, which of course is a very popular TVR, probably one of the most popular actually, if not the most popular from most people. Certainly most racing gamers seem to like the Sagaris a whole lot. Personally though, funnily enough, I've never liked the Sagaris that much. I prefer the smoother, simpler looking TVRs, and as far as that design style goes, this one is pretty much the definition of that. It's based on the Tuscan, it is a Tuscan, but it's the Tuscan R. Now there are three vehicles from TVR which are very similar to each other. They're basically three different versions of the same idea. There's the Typhon, the Tuscan R, and the T400. Which also comes as the T440R, which are two different versions of the same thing. And the basic concept of all three cars is kind of the same, and that is a touring version of the Tuscan. So instead of just being this Targa top, cramped two-seater, cramped in a general sense of course, as much as any sports car is, this one is designed to have that more touring style, not quite a shooting brake, but it's getting there. It's got that more fastback style coupe, more luggage space, more long distance sports car, if you will. But at the same time it also has more power than the Tuscan usually has, and the weight is also very good, even though it is a larger car. And that's one of the great things about TVRs. No matter how big they are, be it the Speed 12 or a Cerbera or the Tuscan or the Chimera, even down to something like a V8S or a Griffith, they usually all weigh a similar amount, between 800 and 1100 kilos. That tends to be the standard for TVR. Most of them tend to be around 1000 to 1100 kilos, and this one is no exception. It weighs 1060, which is remarkably good. I mean, just that on its own is fantastic for a sports car. It's very easy to underestimate having low weight, especially in a sports car of this size, but the reality is most sports cars are nowhere near that lightweight. Something like a Lotus Elise would be, but not of this type of vehicle, because this is a direct rival to stuff like the Aston Martin Vantage, or a Corvette, or a Porsche 911, and they weigh nothing close to that. They weigh at least 400 or 500 kilos more, sometimes even more than that. So that alone is a great start. Now the engine on this one produces 450 horsepower, it's a naturally aspirated unit, 350 pound-feet of torque, and it's an A-class vehicle, 834 PI. So it's quite reasonable as far as that goes, potentially quite usable as well. The horsepower per tonne is also very good, 425 stock, and the only potential disadvantage when it comes to its raw spec is just the price. It is a quite expensive car at 220,000 credits. Which is unfortunate. It doesn't really need to be that much, but at the same time I can kind of understand what they were going for. It is, after all, kind of a rare car, to say the least. It's a really rare car, the reality is. I'm not sure what exactly the production story is of the Typhon / Tuscan R / T440R, but they all have, as I said, a very similar style, a similar layout, and seem to be intended for a similar purpose. But at the same time, I don't know how many, if any, were actually sold. I believe there are a couple on the road, but I don't know if they're just the concept versions or prototypes that people were allowed to buy. But either way, it's a great car on paper, but with TVRs, you can never really be sure exactly what they're going to drive like when you actually pull them out of the garage and take them on a track, especially if you turn off stuff like ABS, traction control, stability manager. They can become leery, to say the least. In fact, leery is a good term to describe pretty much all TVRs. That's exactly what they are. They are pure, raw old school sports cars, which basically are still using the methodology of stuff from the 50s and 60s, but with a lot more power and a lot more performance that you had in the 50s and 60s. These are 200 mile per hour cars that can do 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds easily, even with less power than many of their rivals, and that is partially due to, as I said, the weight. Now this car, I have to say, is a very good handling model, and I believe part of that has to do with the fact that it is more of a tourer. Now being a tourer means that, of course, it's not going to be quite as sharp a track car as something like a normal Tuscan or a Sagaris. But at the same time, you'd be kind of wrong in thinking that, because it actually is as good, but it's good in different ways. It's not as sharp or as manoeuvrable as a Sagaris, because it is a bigger car, but it's definitely more impressive than the normal Tuscan in terms of trackability. It can quite easily outdo the Tuscan around the track, not just in terms of straight line performance either, because it is a far more powerful car as well, but it's just the overall package of the Tuscan R, which I would say makes it so good. Now this was only ever featured in the first and second game, and although this is one of those cars that I can understand why they didn't keep it, because it's not a car that most people probably care about that much. Those of us who do really like it, but there aren't many of us. Most people would just be like, oh yeah, another TVR, that's pretty cool. But beyond that, not many people are hugely into this car, and it would seem not so many people are hugely into the brand either, because they're being featured, as I said, less and less, and yet you still don't really hear much of an outcry over that. But I personally think it's a shame, but still it does give us a reason to go back and check out this car on Forza 1 or Forza 2, which is of course the whole point of this review series. So if you do get a chance to drive this one, it's a very good example of a pure sports car, but at the same time a deceptively competitive one. So it's definitely worth checking out if you're on the game, certainly a unicorn car in the literal sense. And that's it for this particular pick. So of course I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.